My name is Sarah. I'm 33 years old. The click of the lock echoed louder than all the years of silence I had put up with. One second, I was a mother in the hallway, my 6-year-old son's hand in mine. The next, I was on the wrong side of the door, cast out by my own husband and his family. They thought they were just getting rid of a burden, an inconvenient wife. They had no clue that the horrifying secret they were about to find in my old bedroom drawer would be the real price they'd have to pay. They didn't know their clean, perfect house was about to become a crime scene. And the secret they were about to unearth, it wasn't just going to change their lives, it was going to end them. This isn't one of those stories where the wronged woman finds some triumphant new life. This is a story about a dark secret, a choice that was born of pure fear, and the catastrophic mess that came after. My name is Sarah, and I did a terrible, terrible thing. But what my family never understood is that monsters aren't always born. Sometimes they're made, and they had spent years creating me. Before the slammed door and the police sirens, there was a life that looked pretty normal from the outside. I lived with my husband, Mark, his parents, Carol and David, and our son, Leo. We'd moved into his parents' large suburban house 5 years ago after Mark's business failed. It was supposed to be temporary, just a way for us to get back on our feet. But temporary has a funny way of becoming permanent when you're not the one in charge. My mother in law, Carol, was the queen of the castle, and she never let me forget it. Every meal I cooked was wrong. Every choice I made for Leo was questioned, and every dollar I spent was scrutinized. I was living on a knife's edge of quiet disapproval, day in and day out. Mark, who was once my partner and my protector, slowly just became their son again. He'd defend their little comments, telling me to just be more understanding or don't take it so personally. He stopped seeing the thousand tiny cuts they were giving me every day. He just saw a roof over our heads that he wasn't providing. My only light in that whole house was Leo. He was a bright, happy kid who deserved so much more than a mother walking on eggshells and a father who had just retreated into himself. I poured everything I had into him, trying to shield him from the tension that hummed in the walls. I volunteered at his school, took him to the park every single day, and I made sure his life felt big and full of love, even if mine felt small and suffocating. Their control was absolute. Carol would reorganize my drawers when I was out. David would lecture me about the cost of electricity if I left a light on for 5 minutes too long. They weren't cruel to my face. It was more like a slow, creeping erosion of who I was. They made me feel like a guest, then a burden, and finally like an intruder in my own life. It was a perfectly manicured prison, and I had honestly forgotten what freedom even felt like. What they didn't know was that the real pressure wasn't just emotional. After his business failed, Mark became terrified of any new responsibility. One night, after a really vicious argument with his dad about money, he turned to me, his eyes wide with a panic I'd never seen before. "No more surprises, Sarah," he'd said, his voice trembling. "No more dependence. We can't afford another mouth to feed. My parents would throw us out for good. I mean it, no more. Kids." That wasn't a discussion. It was a threat. And it was a threat I carried with me, like a heavy stone in my gut for months. Then the impossible happened. Two blue lines on a plastic stick. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a cold, paralyzing terror. All I could see was Mark's panicked face. All I could hear was Carol's sharp, judgmental voice. I pictured us, Leo included, being thrown out with absolutely nowhere to go. My fear was so total it blocked out all reason. I couldn't tell Mark. I couldn't tell anyone. So I made a decision, a monstrous, unthinkable decision born from that terror. I decided to hide it. Hiding a pregnancy is a full-time job. It meant baggy sweaters and pretending I had stomach bugs. It meant avoiding Carol's prying eyes and Mark's occasional distracted affection. My world shrank down to the confines of my own body, to the secret growing inside me. The fear was a constant whisper in my ear that this was the only way to protect Leo, the only way to keep that fragile roof over his head. I gave birth alone, in the dead of night, in the bathtub, muffling my own screams into a towel. I named her Lily. She was so tiny, and she had a small cleft palate, something I only noticed in the dim glow of the nightlight. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of terror through me. She would need doctors, specialists, care I couldn't possibly explain. That's when the horrifying logic of my situation locked into place. I could never reveal she existed, not now, not ever. And that's when my bedroom drawer became her whole world. I cleaned out the deep bottom drawer of our divan bed and lined it with blankets. It became her crib, her prison. This is the hardest part to say. This is the part that makes me a monster. I know that. But in my shattered, terrified mind, it felt like the only way to survive. I fed her with a syringe, a mix of milky cereal and water, just enough to keep her quiet, just enough to keep her alive. I'd wait until the house was empty, when Mark was at his part-time job and his parents were out, just to hold her. They were frantic, stolen moments of a motherhood that didn't even feel real. She hardly ever cried. It was like she knew, on some deep primal level, that silence was her only protection. She would just look at me with these wide, vacant eyes, a silent, blinking accusation. This went on for months. The strain was breaking me. I was a ghost in that house. My mind completely consumed by the child in the drawer and the child outside of it. My secret life was just this constant humming anxiety. Leo started to notice. He'd ask me, "Mommy, why are you so tired? Why don't you smile anymore?" The end didn't come with the discovery, it came with a stupid normal fight. It was over a bill that Carol had, of course, opened, a credit card bill. It was $100 more than she thought was acceptable. It was for new shoes and a winter coat for Leo. The argument was explosive, but it was never really about the money. It was about control. It was just the final straw. Mark, his face a mask of tired anger, sided with them. "We can't do this anymore, Sarah," he said, not even looking at me. "You don't respect the rules of this house. You're a financial drain." "It's my son's house," Carol added, her voice just dripping with venom. "And he's decided. It's time for you and Leo to go." They packed a bag for me. They just stood there, the three of them, this united front, as I took Leo's crying, confused hand. He kept asking where we were going. I had no answer for him. As the front door shut behind me, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the sound of my life shattering. But as I stood there, on the cold pavement, one single horrifying thought took over everything. I had left Lily behind. They had kicked me out, but they had locked themselves in with my secret. My mind was just a blur of panic. I sat in my car with Leo in the back seat, parked a block away from the house, trying to figure out what on earth I was going to do. How could I get back in? What could I possibly say? But inside that house, my departure was a reason to celebrate. Carol, as I found out later from police reports, announced it was time to finally purge the house of all her junk. She went straight for my old bedroom. She was a woman on a mission, pulling clothes from the closet, stripping the bed with a vengeance. Mark was downstairs, pouring his father a celebratory drink. It was Carol who heard it first. A faint sound, a sound you could barely hear, a kind of soft shuffling noise. She froze. The house was supposed to be silent, finally free of me. She listened again. There it was. It sounded like it was coming from the bed. She called for Mark. Her voice, usually so steady and in charge, had a tremor in it I'm sure he'd never heard before. "Mark, there's a noise in here." He was annoyed at first. "It's probably just the house settling, Mom." "No, She insisted. It's coming from the bed. They both stood there in the quiet room listening. The sound was a faint whimper, a weak noise that was barely human. They traced it to the large drawer at the bottom of the divan. Mark looked at his mother, a silent question passing between them. He knelt down. His hand hovered for a second before he pulled the drawer open. And then their world stopped. Inside, nestled among the blankets, was a child. But it wasn't a healthy, gurgling baby. This child was pale, almost translucent. Her hair was matted, her limbs were thin and floppy, her eyes wide and dark just blinked up at them, totally unresponsive. She was nearly 2 years old, but had the size and muscle tone of a baby. And the smell of neglect, of stale milk and sickness filled the room. The secret wasn't just a baby. The secret was the evidence of a horror they could never have imagined. The secret was Lily, and she was a living ghost. Carol let out a raw, guttural scream, a sound of pure, undiluted horror. Mark stumbled backward, his face gray, his mind just unable to process what he was seeing. In that drawer lay the total and complete destruction of their world. They thought they had kicked out the problem. They had no idea the real problem had been sleeping under their own roof the entire time. A silent testament to a life lived in the darkest of shadows. The aftermath was a storm of blue and red lights. Mark's 911 call was a frantic, incoherent mess from a man who had just found a monster in his own home. Paramedics rushed in, their faces grim as they carefully lifted Lily out of that drawer. She was rushed to the hospital, a tiny, fragile little thing whose whole life had been a dark, quiet box. My world ended with a phone call from a police officer. "Ma'am, we need you to come to the house. It's about your daughter." That word, daughter, just hung in the air like a death sentence. When I got there, the house was sealed off with yellow tape. I wasn't met with sympathy. I was met with handcuffs. The comeuppance for Mark and his family wasn't the satisfaction I might have craved once. It was so much worse. Their pristine home was now a crime scene. Their neighbors, the people they cared so much about impressing, stared from behind their curtains as investigators in white suits carried out evidence bags. The syringe, the soiled blankets, the drawer itself, they were brought in for questioning. Again and again and again, their lives were put under a microscope. How could you not have known? For almost 2 years, in your own home, that question hung over them like a shroud. They insisted they were ignorant, but the seed of doubt was planted. Were they complicit? Did they create an environment of such fear and control that a woman would resort to something like this? Their reputation, the very bedrock of their existence, was shattered. They became the subject of whispered gossip and open condemnation. Legally, I was the one responsible. I pled guilty to felony child cruelty and neglect. There's no defense for what I did. I was sentenced to 7 years in prison. During the trial, every ugly detail of our lives came out. Mark's threats, Carol's control, David's silent complicity. They had to sit there in a public courtroom and listen as my lawyer painted a picture of the psychological prison they had built for me. They weren't charged with a crime, but they were tried in the court of public opinion and found guilty. They lost their friends, their standing in the community, and they lost their own son. Mark spiraled into a deep depression, unable to put together the image of the wife he kicked out with the woman who had hidden a child from him. The family just imploded. Their perfect facade was burned to the ground, and all that was left were the ashes of their pride. I served 4 years of my sentence. Prison was a harsh, sterile place, but For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding anything. The secret was out, and in its place was a stark, brutal clarity. I had to face the woman I'd become and the choices I'd made. I don't have my children. Leo is with my sister, far away from the toxicity of that family. He's in therapy, and we are slowly, painstakingly trying to rebuild some kind of relationship through letters and supervised calls. And Lily is my constant prayer. She was placed in what specialized foster care. The first reports were devastating. She couldn't walk or talk. She was terrified of open spaces and sunlight. They said she had the developmental age of a 10-month-old, even though she was almost 3. But she is a survivor. Her foster parents are patient and kind. They send me pictures. In the latest one, she's standing all on her own, and there's a small, tentative smile on her face. A happy ending isn't a reunion, it isn't forgiveness. It's just the knowledge that Lily is finally in the light. My comeuppance is losing my children. Their comeuppance is losing their everything. They thought they were kicking out a burden, but they ended up uncovering a truth that would serve as their own life sentence. The secret hidden in that drawer didn't just change their lives, it exposed them for exactly who they were. And for Lily, it was, in the most tragic way you can imagine, the beginning of hers. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing for more stories.